Happy Saturday, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. My topic for tonight is End of the War in Gaza, Part 2. Also, Ukraine Peace and Creating Eurasian Integration. I'm going to start off with part of a video where I left off last night in the middle of a video from Nima Al-Kershig, who was interviewing Pepe Escobar. Let me start it here.
When you donate a kidney through the National Kidney Registry, all your donation-related
at the highest level, even on a personal level. So this is it. He basically made his move already.
What they're talking about now is Mohammed bin Salman and the way he's positioned himself in the international system.
But he knows that the empire, when the empire is betrayed, they go really crazy and anything can happen. So he is in a very, very tough position at the moment.
But when it comes to the nature of this defense treaty, why would Saudi Arabia need a defense treaty? Who's going to attack them? Is it Iran?
Exactly.
A good question from Nima. Who's going to attack them right now?
So absurd, because they are... That doesn't make
You're right. It doesn't make sense, Nima. It doesn't make sense at all. It's just the Americans think that they dealing with Saudi Arabia 50 years ago, or even 20 years ago. That's it. They don't see. First of all, they don't understand BRICS. They don't understand the power of BRICS. They don't understand that BRICS is not only geopolitical and geoeconomic, but a very strategic club. And the leadership in BRICS, they are thinking strategically for the rest of the century already. And it's no wonder that everyone now wants to be part of the club. Everyone.
Yes. A very important point. Of course, the United States doesn't want to become a part of BRICS. There are some European states that don't want to become a part of BRICS. There's some Latin American states that don't want to become a part of BRICS. After all, Argentina recently turned down an invitation to BRICS. But nevertheless, we're talking what? One news article reported 59 nations, more nations want to join BRICS.
Everyone, everywhere, in every latitude, The Americans don't understand that. For them, it's absolutely impossible. First of all, because for them, everybody else is inferior. They are exceptional. So they are above everybody else. So, considering the others' motives, policies, anger, no, they don't care. They never did until now. And now it's different because now there is a series of multilateral organizations emerging at the same time who are basically saying, we've had enough and your time is up. Can you imagine the American leadership having to admit that? It's psychologically impossible. So they keep doubling down. They keep betting on divide and rule. They keep betting on the forever wars. They defend a genocide and help to weaponize a genocide. They double down on Ukraine. They are losing Africa as well, so they're going to re-export terror in Africa. They cling to a few colonies in South.
It's a pretty important point, isn't it? He's accusing the United States of planning to re-export terrorism to Africa. So in the chaos, we can once again regain control of Africa. That's a pretty shocking point. I think it's a pretty plausible one. Okay, it's a pretty credible one. And somewhere in the halls of the State Department, that people are planning to import some terrorists into Africa and get them working to create more chaos and disorder.
America. For instance, Argentina, which they conquered on a platter, was a gift from above. What happened with Argentina? That's it. But they know that they are being expelled from Eurasia. They are going to lose the Persian Gulf sooner or later. I would say sooner rather than later. They are losing Africa big time. And they have a few pockets in South America, and that's it. And that could change in a matter of a few years. So it is a cornered empire, and that's what makes them even more dangerous, because now they know that they need to go for broke. And go for broke means what? False flags, supporting terrorism all over again. And even if we get to a really mad situation, literally, a first nuclear strike against Russia, because this is provided by the American doctrine. The American doctrine is a first strike doctrine. The Russian doctrine, no, the Russian doctrine is a defensive doctrine. So you can have Zyokons dictating policy crazy enough to go for it and convince the Pentagon to be on their side. The
Zyokons are the neocons who are also Zionists.
People in the Pentagon who actually think they know this is absurd, because then this will be World War III and everybody dies. But the Zyokons, they cannot think that far. They are very shallow intellectually, and they are moved by hate and ideology. And they don't see reality. Their reality is a bubble. That makes them even more dangerous, assuming that they can have a final decision, like especially now with a very weak, a cadaver in the White House. Literally, that's not a president; it's a walking cadaver.
So he laid it on the table. He's a walking cadaver.
It's serious. It's very serious.
I think the problem you're having with these Arab states like Saudi Arabia and UAE is they don't know how to say no to the United States. They didn't learn it. And it seems that they're trying to buy time they're in the process of learning how to say no to the United States. At the same time, understanding the power of BRICS and how BRICS can help them.
They're learning. Like we've been talking about MBS and MBZ UAE as well. He was at the G7, and he had an excellent conversations with Modi. He had a very good conversation with Lula. So MBZ, which thinks he was top of the world, he's more humble now. He knows that he can be very vulnerable as well, and he knows that the right thing for them is to be part of this new club. And so he's learning little by you can see, even if you look at his body language, it changed a lot. It's much more amenable than before. You know, it's very interesting to see how their behavior, their personal behavior is changing, and how they're learning by interacting with their club members. Fascinating. I was paying a lot of attention to MBZ at the G7. I was looking at some photos in detail, and you could tell that he was enjoying it immensely. And like, he discovered that he was a member of the best club in town, and he didn't know it.
Just to wrap up this session.
Okay, so another important point. Okay, just personal observations, from a reporter about how Mohammed bin Salman is adapting himself to the new power arrangements in the world. When he went to a conference and found out that he was a member of the world's best club.
Pepe. And
Yes.
I think the article you wrote is so important in terms of what's going on, the future of Palestine. If BRICS let Palestine in, that would be huge, because we know the Security Council is not accepting Palestine as a state. But if BRICS accept Palestine, that would hugely benefit Palestine and the future of Palestine.
This is a very good point, Nima. And nobody addressed the subject under this possibility. For instance, I have not seen anybody here or echoes from China that they would consider something like this. But if BRICS, as a symbolic gesture, would tell the whole planet, now Palestine is one of our members, wow. Now talk about game changing. Of course, we know what would happen from the other side. Nah? They would be even more rabid and toxic than they are now. But so what? What are they going to do? They're going to bomb BRICS capitals? No, they won't.
But of course, that's a joke, because there is no BRICS capital.
But the symbolic message especially can you imagine, to the world of Islam would be something. But this, I doubt that they are cautious enough, at least this year, to do something like this. We don't know what's going to happen until the end of this year. Maybe next year, if things get totally out of control, this could be a very intelligent move and an extremely popular move all over the planet, in fact, especially 1.5 billion Muslims, even more, 1.6 billion, even more. Wow. On their side, which is already on their side. The lands of Islam are already on the side of BRICS, of multipolarity, of all these multilateral organizations. There will be more Muslim countries that will become BRICS members sooner or later. Example, Algeria, Indonesia. But let's put this on the table.
Yeah.
And all of us independents, we should start maybe an informal campaign directed towards BRICS leadership. Why don't you consider something like this?
Yeah, so amazing. Would be so amazing. Muito
Very good
obrigado,
idea. And you are the father of the idea. Very good.
So that is a great idea. And that idea might have an effect in terms of ending the war in Gaza if it happened very quickly. It would just shock the world. However, I think that our next video from Judge Napolitano and from Scott Ritter suggests that whether BRICS acts to allow Palestine to get in, or whether they do not, the dynamics of the battlefield situation in Palestine right now suggests that this war may be coming to an end. So let me share the screen for Scott Ritter and Judge Napolitano, starting at about 15:57 of their video together when they turn to the Middle East.
This broadcast, the Wall Street Journal reported that the IDF announced that it cannot defeat Hamas in direct and public defiance of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government.
So that's the key fact, okay, and the key event, that the IDF has recognized that there will be no victory for it. Now, what are the implications of that?
What does that mean?
We're at an existential stage of Netanyahu's political existence. He has positioned Israel, and I know there's a lot of pro-Israeli people out there, but
on October 19th, 2023, Wells Fargo warned its clients that all checking accounts are likely to be replaced with...
The Journal reported that the IDF announced that it cannot defeat Hamas in direct and public defiance of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government. What does that mean?
We're at an existential stage of Netanyahu's political existence. He has positioned Israel, and I know there's a lot of pro-Israeli people out there, but understand Israel has lost this war, dramatically lost this war. And if they go to war with Hezbollah, as Netanyahu is promising to do, it will be the strategic defeat of Israel. I just hope people understand that. Understand when Hezbollah releases drone footage that shows how it has mapped out the totality of the target set in northern Israel. When Hezbollah releases videos that show that they can, at any time of their choosing, take out the Iron Dome system or the David Sling system or the Arrow 3 system, that Israel has no effective ballistic missile defense, and that Hezbollah has tens of thousands of rockets, which will enable them to blanket Israel on a daily basis from the top to
150,000 rockets, missiles, and drones.
To the bottom, from the left to the right, from the river to the sea, with high precision missiles that will destroy everything they hit. That if Israel chooses to go to war with Hezbollah, it will be the physical destruction of Israel, not just the military defeat, but Israel will be physically destroyed. The Israeli military knows this.
So Scott, is saying something that I haven't really heard before. He's saying that Hezbollah alone has the power to physically destroy Israel. Before I was thinking, if Hezbollah starts off and Iran joins in, the power to destroy Israel would be there. But Scott is making a very important point that Hezbollah alone has the capacity to do that. For Israel to do the same to Hezbollah, they would have to attack with tactical nuclear weapons, and God knows what happens if they start with that. Even then, it might not succeed, because Hezbollah is dug deep into the ground, even deeper than Hamas.
They're not stupid. They understand they've been beaten in Gaza. What the spokesperson says is that Hamas is an ideology, and you cannot defeat an ideology. And this is true. You can't. You can't kill an ideology. In fact, what Israel is doing in Gaza is strengthening the Hamas ideology on a daily basis. Hamas is stronger today than they were on October 6th or October 7th. And they get stronger every day because Israel positions itself to fit the international definitions that have been put out there of apartheid state.
Just a comment on the point, you cannot defeat, an ideology. Well, we tried to defeat the ideology, of Nazism, and did a pretty thorough job at the end of the Second World War. But Nazism still existed in various hidey holes. And also the CIA was supporting the continued existence of the Banderites after the end of World War II. And so part of our government was still nurturing some partisans of the ideology, of Nazism. Over the years, they continue to exist. They continue to honor their heroes, and they came back to bite the rest of the world, in the Ukraine war and in the coup in Ukraine of 2014. They provided the muscle in that particular coup. So the Nazis are still with us and still doing damage. So it is hard to kill, an ideology. It may not be impossible, but it's certainly very hard to kill one.
And genocide state. Israel has defeated itself, and this is what the public relations officer of the IDF is acknowledging. And notice that the Netanyahu came out and said, no. Our mission is to defeat. Did you see what the IDF High Command did? They came out and said the spokesperson was speaking about Hamas as an ideology, and we agree with everything he said. So now the military has come out and told Netanyahu, we don't agree with you. And now the question comes if Netanyahu orders this invasion, and just so people understand the seriousness of this, Israel, the military went out and cut a secret deal with Cyprus, sent their air force to Cyprus so that they could operate out of Cypriot bases. Why? Because they know Hezbollah is going to destroy their air bases. So they need to relocate to Cyprus to continue the war. Hezbollah, of course, found out and told Cyprus, we will destroy you too. And look what Cyprus just did. We have nothing to do with it. They know what the reality is. The IDF knows what the reality is. Netanyahu lives in a political fantasy land.
So tell me a little bit more about the extent of Netanyahu's power.
So that was an interesting point. So the Israeli Air Force had a backup plan. They would relocate their bases to Cyprus, figuring that would be safe from Hezbollah. Hezbollah countered with a threat to Cyprus, and Cyprus folded and said, no, we have nothing to do with this. Amazing.
I mean, I couldn't imagine General Pat Ryder, an innocuous person, but the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I couldn't imagine him holding a press conference saying, Ukraine can't win and we're wasting our money there, in defiance of the White House. Is Netanyahu the commander-in-chief of the IDF? How can the IDF defy him, even if he's wrong and the IDF is based on reality?
Israel's a strange puppy. First of all, they don't have a constitution. They have, they have laws, basic laws. The prime minister is not the commander-in-chief, the singular commander-in-chief. The prime minister must operate in wartime with a war cabinet. Go back and look at 1973, the Yom Kippur War, or in 1967, and read the histories of Israeli decision-making during that conflict. It wasn't the prime minister dictating. The prime minister has to bring in a cabinet and get consensus, a war cabinet, a war team that has consensus on this. And an important part of this war team is the Israeli Defense Force. And so, it's different. You can't make the direct contrast between Israel and the United States. In the United States, Military-civil relationships are defined by the Constitution. The military works exclusively for the executive, who is the commander-in-chief. Netanyahu is not the commander-in-chief. Netanyahu is the prime minister, and decisions are made by a war cabinet. And right now, the war cabinet has collapsed. Benny Gantz, a major opposition figure who had propped up this war cabinet, has resigned. Others have resigned. Now Netanyahu has surrounded himself with far-right people who have no knowledge of military events, and they're encouraging this strike into Hezbollah, etc. But the military is there as a check and a balance to make sure that decisions aren't made that are politicized in nature, that the greater good of Israel is considered. And right now, the military knows that to go to war against Hezbollah is literally to invite the physical destruction of Israel.
So the IDF is not considering, notwithstanding what the skirmishes that have been going on up there, notwithstanding what Netanyahu has been saying, the IDF is not considering war with Hezbollah because they know the consequences which you've just described.
The IDF is prepared for any possible option that is required by the situation. I'm not saying
that defeat Hamas. How are they going to defeat Hezbollah?
Well, again, the IDF is not going to go to war against Hezbollah to preserve Netanyahu's political power.
Right.
If they do go to war against Hezbollah, it's because they will have made a decision that they've reached the point of no return, that the escalation of the conflict on the border is such that it has in and of itself reached an existential nature that Israel has no choice but to respond militarily, but in which case Israel understands the consequences, that the consequences of doing nothing outweigh the consequences of actually going to war.
So if Scott is right about that, then that gives Hezbollah a tool to manage the escalation. If they're careful to manage their escalation so that it doesn't look to Israel like an existential threat, okay, to Israel. And you can pretty much think about what that is like. For example, okay, if Hezbollah doesn't start wholesale attacks, okay, against Haifa, okay, and Tel Aviv, and then pretty much the kind of thing they're doing now is certainly damaging and very annoying, and ties up also many troops. But at the same time, it's not an existential threat, okay, to Israel yet, and will not be seen as one. And so the IDF wants no part of them at this point. They're content with the status quo, with the tit for tat on the or near, the northern border. Okay, so that can go on for a long time without a general war, because the Israeli military does not want, okay, a general war.
Right now, the IDF believes that this situation can be managed. I think you're going to start seeing political consensus in Israel move towards a ceasefire agreement in Gaza that brings an end to that conflict, and therefore brings an end to the conflict in the north, and therefore preserves Israel's political, economic, and territorial integrity.
So that is Scott's judgment, and it's the most important point of all. That in order to avoid further escalation up in the north, in order to avoid an almost inevitable war with Hezbollah up in the north, the IDF will begin to favor, okay, a ceasefire, since it's already decided it cannot get a victory, okay, in Gaza. And Scott sees a consensus developing within the IDF and within the other sectors of the military that we cannot win. We have to have a ceasefire. We have to settle. Now, it doesn't say anything about the terms of the ceasefire, but if it's to be a permanent ceasefire, it's pretty clear they'll have to negotiate with Hamas, and those negotiations will have to include the possibility of a Palestinian state.
To expand this conflict invites disaster, and the IDF isn't in the business of inviting disaster. Their job is to avoid disaster or counter disaster.
And that's in spite of the fact that they're racist, in spite of the fact that they want to maintain the apartheid state if they possibly can. Scott is saying they're still not in the business of disaster. They don't want a disaster. They're recognizing full-scale war, okay, with Hezbollah, okay, up in the north, coupled with the lack of ability to win in Gaza, that's a disaster for Israel that would threaten its very existence. But Scott goes further than this here, further in terms of the significance of what he says.
How accepted by the Israeli people is the, and this is going to be a guess on your part because the announcement was just made literally 20 minutes ago by the IDF that it cannot defeat Hamas. Does the Israeli public understand that, notwithstanding October 7th, notwithstanding the suppression of free speech, notwithstanding the one-sided news that the Netanyahu government has been feeding them?
Well, understand that in Israel, there's actually a free press. I mean, they are constrained by military censorships and talking about specific military operations. But for instance, Haaretz has been very critical of this, and Haaretz has been, putting out opinion pieces that say the exact same thing that the Israeli spokesperson said, that Hamas isn't being defeated, can't be defeated. Haaretz regularly interviews former generals, former Mossad, senior Mossad officials who say the same thing. And so I would say, and the Israeli people, I mean, I don't believe that they've fundamentally changed their internal dynamic. They're a very politicized people, very well-read on the issues. If the old joke was you bring 6 Israelis together and for dinner, you're going to have a 6-way debate, and all points will be equally argued with equal intensity and backed up by facts. Because life is nuanced. It's not black and white, it's gray. And the Israelis know this. So I think that the Israeli public isn't going to reject this. This war has become heavily politicized. The Zionist element, the pro-Zionist element, the right wing of Israel understands that this is an existential fight for their political survival, that as goes Netanyahu, so do they go. And they know that if he is compelled to resign or if he is pushed out of power, they have lost their hold on power. And so there's that element going on in Israel today. I just want to remind everybody that the president of Israel warned the Israeli people and the world before October 7th that because of the internal struggles against Netanyahu about what he was trying to do, changing basic law, taking control of the judiciary, the president said Israel is in grave danger of entering a civil war, not civil conflict, not civil disobedience, right. A civil war. And this was before October 7th. Those societal fractures still exist today, and that makes Israel a very dangerous place.
How precarious is Israel today, militarily, economically, diplomatically?
A great question from the judge.
Diplomatically, Israel's isolated in the world today, and it's not recoverable. Israel will never recover its position. Diplomats have disgraced the state. Take a look at the performance of the Israeli ambassador at the United Nations. He's become a literal walking, talking meme, which puts Israel in a bad light. The world has turned its back on Israel. Even America, the last supporter of Israel, is starting to say, we're not giving you weapons. We're not going to permit this. We're not going to allow this to happen. Netanyahu chastising an American president on TV, that's political suicide. It doesn't happen in Israel. Prime ministers don't speak out against the United States, who is the lifeline they must have. It shows how desperate Netanyahu is. So politically, he's done. Politically, as I said, Israel, I firmly have endorsed the analysis of other people who are smarter on Israel than I am, that Israel is actually, it's not going to survive the decade as Israel. It can't. Economically, it's devastated. It will never recover from this. Politically, it's fundamentally divided. And the thing that gives Israel foundation upon which it is built in the present period, these settlers, this concept of a single Israeli state is a discredited ideology that will be deconstructed in the coming years as the world pushes for a two-state solution. And the process of trying to build a two-state solution will cause Israel to break up and demobilize. You'll see millions of Israelis with dual citizenship flee a country that's no longer worth living in. And then we're going to be looking at a one-state solution. So Israel is.
Okay, so I thought that was an interesting picture he was painting, okay, of the process. He thinks that Israel will soon be forced to accept a two-state solution. But that two-state solution will itself result in hundreds of thousands of people wanting to leave Israel and go back where they came from. And I think that could be correct. And the reason why it could be correct is, well, of course, the two-state solution might not be one that's secure for Israel. The Palestinian state may still want to launch attacks, okay, against Israel. Okay, but even if it doesn't, it would be a situation where if the two-state solution is to be viable, it's going to require the settlers getting out of the West Bank. There are 750,000 settlers there. That in turn means they're going to have to resettle in Israel proper, where there may not be space, may be hard to find the free land there. It may be in areas they don't like as well. But it could also be a situation where perhaps a lot of the settlers have come, not only for the housing incentives that they've gotten, but also because they were on a kind of messianic mission to go settle inside of Israel, create the facts on the ground, okay, and eventually create the foundation for a one-state solution where Palestine from the river to the sea would be Israel. They might be looking at themselves as fulfilling prophecy and as playing a part, okay, in that. Once the two-state solution comes, that part of the prophecy is gone. They can no longer hope for that anymore. They might leave and go back to their home societies just because of that. If Israel becomes a state that no longer has the greater Israel ambition, many of the settlers might not be interested in that, and they might want to go home where the economy is better, where they would then feel more secure, and where their children could live, okay, a better life. So Scott sees the unwinding of Israel once a two-state solution is in place, a loss of population. If the Israelis lose the 750,000 settlers, and they begin to lose some more because of the economic difficulties that Israel would have in a post-war situation where there is a two-state solution, they might simply decide that the future of themselves and their kids is better off, Okay, the countries that they can go to, that they can migrate to.
Let's finish. Militarily, the bottom line is Israel's a nation that had access to high technology, and it sought to exploit this this unilateral advantage to maintain supremacy. But at the end of the day, war is about a boot on the ground. It's about the quality of the foot in the boot, and the quality of the Israeli foot in the Israeli boot on the ground of Gaza ain't that good. They're getting wiped out. We're talking, the Israelis are acknowledging, 11, 12 dead a day. The fact is they may be losing 40, 50 dead a day, unsustainable. 70,000 permanently injured Israeli soldiers.
I
70,000.
saw that number this morning, Scott, and I was astounded because I saw it on social media. I didn't see it in
70,000 permanently wounded Israelis, okay, males. Their lives changed for good. The problems of adaptability. Of course, nothing like the damage done to the Palestinians by the war. But still, it represents damage to a population that has been in a superior position for very long and has been used to a European lifestyle and has been prosperous.
the New York Times or hear it on Fox News or see it on the Washington Post. Is that confirmed? 70,000 permanently injured IDF. This is civilian army. This is not an army like we have.
The Israeli Defense Force, I believe, is the one that's released this figures related, and also in relationship to the. But again, you got to understand, the Israelis build decent equipment. Again, I come back to the technology. So when you're in a Merkava tank and it gets hit by a projectile that under normal circumstances would kill the tank crew, there's a survivability factor. But it doesn't mean that the guys inside are okay. We're looking at traumatic brain injuries. So they might be physically okay, but the brain is jelly. We're looking at permanent disfigurement from burning, lost limbs, cracked limbs, broken spines. The amount of paraplegics and quadriplegics and, people who've lost their arms and their legs in this conflict is beyond belief.
This is something Israel has never faced before. It's never happened in any of their other wars. The number of casualties was always fairly minor. And even in 1973, when it was relatively serious, it's still fairly minor compared to the casualties they've suffered in this war. This war has been a disaster for them. And remember, the Israeli state was promising to the immigrants, it was promising security, that they could come to live in a safe place where they were favored, where the law favored them. In a post-war Israel with a two-state solution, it will probably be part of the two-state solution that they will not be able to maintain apartheid even in their Israeli state. They're going to have to recognize the rights of Palestinians who live in that particular state, and they're going to have to recognize that they have equal rights. That's going to change the situation for the Israelis. They're also going to have to stop attacks on Palestinians. It's going to be a very changed situation for many people and many families who have come to live there, and many families who have lived there for generations. It won't be what they're used to. They will have to adapt. And will they want to stay? Okay, it's a big question. By the way, they won't have access to the eastern part of Jerusalem. They may still have access to the Western Wall. I'm sure that can be arranged. But other than that, the hopes for a third temple would be gone. They would have to respect, and in fact, the government of East Jerusalem would be a Palestinian government, and they would ensure the safety, okay, of the Muslims who wish to worship at the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
The medical cost alone, if the war ended, just the medical cost of sustaining this many casualties. Take a look at the global war on terror and what it did to the Veterans Administration here in America as people started pouring into a system that wasn't designed to absorb this many problematic cases. People with, again, the traumatic brain injury. We don't know how to deal with PTSD. We haven't figured out. That's why there's 22, 26 veterans a day committing suicide here. It's going to be a problem for Israel as well.
How universal is the disgust for the behavior of the IDF in Gaza? Example, the IDF called about a 12-hour pause in fighting. The prime minister condemned the pause, which is what prompted me to ask you, isn't he the commander-in-chief? I now understand that he's not. And then gangs of Israeli fanatics blocked the aid from coming in while the IDF stood by and allowed them to do it. This must produce revulsion throughout the world. So my question, how universal, you have your finger on the pulse of these things from your sources around the world, how universal do you think is the revulsion at the behavior of the Netanyahu government and the IDF in Gaza?
It's a complicated question, so I'm going to give you a complicated answer. I probably know it's probably not what you want or your audience wants, but it's the truth. The revulsion that we see is superficial in nature. And what I mean by that is, yes, we're revolted by it. We look at it and we say, oh, that's horrible what they're doing. And people are jumping on the bandwagon because it's easy to do. That is easily condemned until you dig down into it and understand that every nation in the world is capable of doing what Israel is doing. Every nation in the world is capable of dehumanizing. We're a nation in the United States that used to sink Japanese trawlers. And as during World War II, and as the Japanese swam to be rescued, we machine gunned them down because we hated the Japanese.
So this is an unexpected point, okay, by Scott. He's giving us his views of what humans are capable of, okay, in wartime. He's not saying the Israelis are unequivocally evil. He's not attempting also to excuse them at all from the genocide. But basically, he's saying that the capacity for genocidal behavior, which the Israelis are exhibiting now, is present, okay, in all nations. I'm going to go on with this, but then I'm going to make some more commentary on this.
That much. What we did in Korea, people don't talk about what we did in Korea during the Korean War to Korean civilians, blowing up bridges with tens of thousands of Koreans on the bridges because we just didn't care about them. We only cared about ourselves. Every nation has this selfishness where it comes down to, when it comes down to issues of existential survival, we are capable of doing horrendous wrong. And so, yes, nations, we are condemning Israel, but I would be careful about putting too much weight on this, because at the end of the day, most people who are in a position of related to the security understand that thereto, but for the grace of God go they. That if they were called upon to do, look at how Europe treats the refugees that come in from Africa.
Yeah, but none of what you're saying can minimize for an iota the genocide that's going on.
I'm not seeking to minimize it at all. What I'm trying to say is, I can guarantee you right now that if America was put in a similar situation, we'd be committing genocide.
Right.
I can guarantee that. And so that's all I'm trying to say.
I know your argument is profound, Scott. It's subtle, profound, and historically based. And you even left things out like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You left a lot of things out that the United States.
Japanese in concentration camps.
Correct.
Japanese Americans.
Correct. FDR looking the other way on December 6th, 1941, knowing damn well what was coming after we had cut off the full supply of oil to the Japanese. Okay, I don't want to get carried away. There are many, many, many examples slaughtering the Native Americans. There are many examples of what you're.
None of it justifies what Israel is doing today. None of it justifies what Israel, and Israel's paying the price. Understand that Israel is paying the price.
Okay.
And Israel.
Back to my question.
Okay, before we get back to his question, I do want to look at the implication of this. If Scott is right, and I think he is, that all nations have the capability of acting this way under certain conditions. And we can see from history, and in a few minutes, okay, they're going to mention also Turkey. And one of the reasons, why Turkey might not be so quick to condemn the Israelis or to actively intervene, against them, is because Turkey is one of those nations that committed, a genocide at one point. The Armenian genocide at the time of the First World War. But if Scott is right, that this is a tendency inherent, to nations, then what becomes very important for us to understand and for us to recognize is the importance of international law and the necessity of beefing it up so that it can handle cases, of genocide. Look at the current situation. The International Court of Justice heard a case and declared that there was a plausible genocide there. But of course, they were having to deliberate for months and months and yet months and perhaps even years before they would decide, actually come to a decision as to whether it was a genocide or not. In other words, the court couldn't act really fast and with the kind of authority that would stop the genocide, that was ongoing. This is not the first time in recent years also that a genocide has happened. So, even though the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court can begin to act to make people accountable for this kind of thing, their powers are still very limited. And this case, of genocide by the Israelis calls for a strengthening of international institutions and limitations to national sovereignty so that there will be a force that would be capable of stopping genocides going forward. I mean, this business with the Israelis, it should have been possible to stop it by the end of October. It was ridiculous what was going on. So, there's a flaw in the international system. This is not a one-off case. The possibility of genocide is a generalized thing in international relations. And we have to fix our international institutions so that there's a force there that can stop genocides, really hold nations accountable for committing genocides, whoever those nations are.
How isolated has Israel made itself? Whether that isolation is a revulsion at the public behavior of their diplomats, or whether that revulsion is caused by the Arab street and the revulsion of the billion Muslims in the world, all of whom live within a few hours, or most of whom live within a few hours of Israel.
It's real. The revulsion's real. And in Israel, I don't think will recover from it. I only brought up, again, there's a difference between fact and perception.
Right.
The fact of Israel's genocide is indisputable. It's there. It's real. It's disgusting. It must be condemned. The people who jump on this, though, I would say that many of them are jumping on because it's a cause. They're jumping on a cause. They don't fully understand things. And we need to guard against looking at pure numbers, because many of the numbers that we see that are jumping on Israel are doing so without a full understanding and comprehension of why they're jumping on it, and without a full recognition that, again, looking in the mirror, there before the grace of God go you. People should really reflect on how they behave in a similar situation. That's all I'm saying. It's very easy to jump on this because Israel's behavior is so abhorrent. It's so disgusting, and it must be condemned.
I guess what I'm driving at is, if Israel doesn't stop, notwithstanding what the IDF said an hour ago, is a state actor likely, well, which will more likely happen? Israel will burn out and be defeated for the reasons you've just articulated, or a state actor, Iran, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, will get involved because enough is enough, and the state actor is under pressure from the people in that state? Which is more likely, in your view, Scott Ritter, to bring about an end to the Israeli slaughter in Gaza?
Israel burns out. Again, Judge, this is what the point I'm trying to make. Why would Turkey, have you seen what Turkey does to the Kurds? Turkey's in no moral high ground to intervene. Turkey's not going to intervene on the moral high ground. Turkey will it will stand by and let Israel burn out and try and manage it to their benefit. If Israel truly cared about the Palestinian people, they would shut down the oil pipeline coming out of Azerbaijan a long time ago. They haven't, because Turkey looks at a larger picture. Look at all the Arab nations that have sat around and not done a damn thing as Israel commits the genocide against the Palestinian people. Why? Because they're willing to live with it. They'll condemn it, but they're not willing to stop it, because in many ways, managing this has always been to their benefit. They've sacrificed the Palestinian people over and over and over again. Iran cares about the Palestinian people, but strategically, I think Iran and Hezbollah, who likewise cares about them, understand that the long-term benefit to the Palestinian people accrues with the termination of Israel. And why not just let Israel burn itself out? And this is a decision, likewise, that Sinwar has made himself. He has given presentations where he said, we knew what was going to happen in Gaza. We knew what Israel was going to do, but this is a sacrifice we had to make in order to get a Palestinian state.
Next month.
I think it's hard to contend, once you understand, that particular attitude, that the people who conducted the attack on October 7th, knowing the cost, it's hard to argue that they do not deserve a Palestinian state.
If he's still in office, Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to address a joint session of Congress. The Republicans have already said the last time he was here, we interrupted his speech with 55 standing ovations in a 40-minute speech, Scott. And we have to break that record this time around. Who knows what the Congress will vote and Joe Biden will go for from and as a result of the speech, if he gives it. Question.
We've heard just recently that he now thinks he won't be able to come to the United States because of the crisis, in Israel. It's probably because of this disagreement between himself, and the IDF. He probably has to be there to constitute, another war cabinet, so that there can be some consensus on what Israel is going to do going forward. Anyway, that's what I've heard. I haven't seen confirmation of it, but I've heard from Dee, who has seen confirmations of it, that Netanyahu will not be coming to the United States. And I say thank God, because the behavior of the Congress, if he comes, will be shameful. It will be another act in the United States endorsing a genocide, something that we will pay dearly for in years to come.
Does it matter how much ammunition and military supplies we send them if they are doomed nevertheless?
Israel said that they can't defeat an ideology, which means it doesn't matter how many bombs, airplanes, missiles we send to Israel. Hezbollah has demonstrated that they will defeat Israel's defenses no matter how many bombs, radars, missiles we sent. It doesn't matter. It's a waste of money, and it prolongs a conflict that only brings endless suffering to the Palestinians, to the Israelis, to everybody involved. It doesn't matter. But this is the stupidity of Congress, which again falls back upon a methodology that dates back to General Eisenhower's famous farewell address, where he warned about the Military Industrial Commission, the Military Industrial Congressional complex, and the role that money plays. The sickness of America is manifest in that we sustain conflict because it's good for our economy.
Yes. That's a sickness. Okay. And that's an evil. And were Netanyahu to come here, Congress would be demonstrating a tendency towards evil. I sincerely hope that I don't have to see that.
Scott, you are my friend and professional collaborator, but I have to say your knowledge of all of this is extraordinary, and your ability to synthesize it and explain nuance is second to none. And I am deeply grateful for our work together and for the time that you spend on the show. Thank you so much, my dear friend. I know you had a power outage earlier today, so we weren't sure if this was going to happen. It's 100 degrees out here in the northeast of the United States. I'm glad your air conditioning is back on.
I have to turn it on. I have reset. So my makeup person has to come in and get the.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you for everything. We'll see you again next week. I hope your house turns nice and cool in the next hour or so.
Thank you.
All
Thanks.
the best to you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. So that says many, many things about the coming end of the war, okay, in Gaza. It may be here before we think. I think the next days are critical. Will there be a new war cabinet in Israel? It's obvious Netanyahu himself doesn't have what he needs to prosecute this war unless he gets a new cabinet and he gets a consensus, okay, from the new cabinet. So we have to watch Israeli politics very closely. We have to pay very, very close attention. And we have to realize the significance of internal politics in Israel for the likely end of the war. But the possibility is there now that it could quickly end, let's say, over the next month now. Too late, of course, to avoid all of the suffering the Palestinians have endured. But the ceasefire could well bring the recognition of a Palestinian state and could well bring agreements that would give us a solution that's a two-state solution. As Scott has said, as he has said, just because there's a two-state solution now, it doesn't mean that in a few years it won't be a one-state solution. And I thought he brought up some very good ideas about the possibility of evolution to a one-state solution there and how it might happen. And I agree with the possibilities that he alluded to there. And I tried to put a little more flesh on them, okay, of my own, as to how why the settlers might be motivated, okay, to leave, and especially so if they're forced out of the West Bank, which I think they must be forced out of the West Bank if there is going to be a two-state solution, okay, that would be coming out of this. Before I go on, and I am going on because I have two other articles to go through, I'm going to take a look at your comments. I see there are a considerable number of people here now. That's very good. I'm very grateful for that. Dawn Foster says, hi, I watch when I can. Kay Ryan says, hi all. Steve Wolfbrand says, hi, Kay, good to see you. Steve says, hi, Dawn. And Steve says, smash the like button and share. Kay says, hi, Steve, good to see you too. And there are more greetings that go on. Hello, D. D is here also. I said, thank you, Steve. And April said, the video I emailed you earlier today, Joe, goes even deeper about the implications if or when the Zion Nazis go after Lebanon. Yes, I had actually seen that video myself, and I'll probably handle it either Tuesday, or Wednesday. I very much respect the analyses and repertorial experience, okay, of Elijah Magnier, who is the reporter who is discussing things, okay, on Breakthrough News, okay, and specifically Rania Khalek's program. Okay, I love the work that Rania Khalek, okay, is doing, and I've loved the previous interviews she had that I came across, with respect to Elijah Magnier. He's a very, very very courageous reporter who is very familiar with the on-the-ground situation inside, okay, of Lebanon. So I'll be handling that, okay, a little later this coming week. Might be on Tuesday. It might be on Wednesday. April says, is white supremacy considered, okay, an ideology, Joe? Well, I think there are a number of different ideologies that contain white supremacy in them. I'm not sure the Israeli ideology is a white supremacist ideology. It looks like it's even worse than that, like it's a religious supremacist ideology with a racial tinge that's favoring white people. It's okay, and people of European extraction also, because inside of Israel proper, there's definitely discrimination against the Middle Eastern Jews and the African Jews, in favor, of the European Jews that mostly founded the state of Israel. Steve Wolfbrand says shared. And thank you very much, Steve. Everybody should please share, like, and subscribe. Okay, especially the like. I see quite a number of people here tonight, but I see only one like. I have to say, I think I deserve a lot more than only one like. So please, if you would, give me some likes. Robert Copeland says, any truth about the IDF will attack Hezbollah over in Lebanon? Well, as we discussed here, yes, there's a possibility they will attack them. There are also going to be tit-for-tat attacks, as we move along, until there's peace. Will they go for a large-scale attack or not? They've been threatening that, but what Hezbollah has been doing, including the release of those photos, showing in detail the Israeli targets that could be attacked. That kind of showing is itself a deterrent against an Israeli attack. I think there probably won't be a general attack unless, of course, Netanyahu regains control of the IDF and there is a new war cabinet that endorses the idea of attacking Lebanon. Okay, we might have that. But if the IDF has its way, then probably there isn't going to be an attack, on Lebanon. A generalized attack, because it's becoming clear to people that Israel would lose that kind of war. And Steve says, hello, Robert. Robert says, wow, it's like 100 degrees in Sacramento. It was 98 degrees here today in Northern Virginia, just west of Washington, D.C. And Bonnie and I were out in the 98 degrees. She went to the hairdresser. And got herself, a lovely haircut. And, I did a little shopping. We also met our son, who's visiting here for lunch. And so we were out in the heat a lot. And of course, even if you're out in that kind of heat just a little, it's pretty tiring. April says, I love the judge's eloquence. He's almost as good as you, Joe. Thank you, April. I appreciate that. The judge can be very eloquent. He really can. One thing I appreciate about him greatly is that he has people on his show from across the political spectrum. He has rightist conservatives on the show. He has military people to the right of center. He has military people to the left of center. He has people who are not military who are to the left of center. He's got all kinds of people on the show. He obviously cares much more about analysis, intelligence, facts, than he does about the ideological position of the people that he brings on the show. He brings people on the show because they make sense to him. That's why he brings them on the show, and he doesn't worry about the ideology. And he makes them all his friends, his dear friends. And he has people just as left as I am on the show who are his dear friends. And he has people on the right, who are on the show. His criterion for being on the show seemed to be that his people are very knowledgeable, very good, at analysis, and that they care about America. And he doesn't much care whether they're right, or left. I really respect him for his respect for free speech and for criticism and for the flow of ideas. So I think he's quite a rare person, and I really enjoy him very much and his style of doing that particular show. Steve says it was hot today in Los Angeles. I'm sure it was, but of course, from where we sit, it's always hot in Los Angeles. April says, that's fantastic that you're already familiar with Elijah M. Well, thank you, April. I got familiar with him because I like the work, that Rania Kalik does. And occasionally, maybe once or twice a week, I take in a stream of hers. She is excellent, of course. And when she, and Eugene get on there and do a stream together, Eugene per year is also a terrific analyst. And I love it when the two of them get together and throw things back and forth. Kay says, say hi to Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. Hi. Kay Ryan sends her regards. And John B. says he never has MMTers on, Joe. Why can't people like the judge and Stock get their head around reality, base macro? That I don't know. I suppose it's because they're involved in foreign policy and in conflicts, and wars, and are not much involved in questions of international trade. If they were discussing issues of international trade, then I think it would be relevant for some of the MMTers to come on, particularly myself, who's written 2 books about international trade. But that's not where their programs go. But it does irritate me. It's not so much when Scott says, some things referring to taxpayers' money, or the judge, refers to taxpayers' money. I kind of expect people to do that. But some of the ideas of Colonel McGregor, and also the judge too, when it comes to monetary sovereignty, from an MMT point of view, are just way out there, completely in error. And they could use, certainly, the MMT perspective on their show for some civil criticism. And April says, Anya is swift and sharp with it. I think you're thinking of Rania Kalik, as opposed to Anya, who's Anya Parampil, who the judge has on his show quite frequently, and who's married to Max Blumenthal. And then there's also the Anya, who's working closely with Scott in doing various interviews. And Scott and she have just released, a new book. It's kind of a multimedia book where they bring their interviews into book form. And so in other words, there are a number of Anyas who are running around, but there's only one Rania, and that is Rania Kalik, who is often seen on on YouTube. By the way, she's a good friend of a number of American lefty streamers, and so is popular on the left here. I still have 2 articles to go through. I know this is a long show, but I intended to make it a long show because I wanted to get some work done. There were 2 great pieces from Pepe Escobar, and I'm now going to introduce you to them. So let's start on those pieces. The first is called, I'm sharing it now. First is called Hegemon Orders Europe, Bet on War and Steal Russia's Money. This is by Pepe Escobar on June 18th, 1,500 words, and it was picked up by me from the UNS Review, where I pick up a lot of Pepe stuff because it's originally published in the Strategic Culture Foundation. And if you stream that on Facebook, you get strikes against you. So I pick it up, from the UNS Review. I'm not entirely sure what that is because there's no caption on the photo, but it's obviously a bunch of people meeting. It might be a scene from the St. Petersburg Economic Conference that was recently completed. Or maybe it was from the Swiss Peace Conference, which is what he's talking about here. The Swiss, quote, peace, quote, kabuki came and went, and the winner was Vladimir Putin. He didn't even have to show up. None of the big players did, or in case they sent their emissaries, there was significant refusal to sign the vacuous final declaration as in BRICS members Brazil, India, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and South Africa. Without BRICS, there's absolutely nothing the collective West, as in the hegemon and assorted vassals, can do to alter the proxy war chessboard in Ukraine. In his carefully calibrated speech to diplomats and the leadership of Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Putin delineated an incredibly restrained and strategic approach to solve the Ukraine problem. I thought it was incredibly restrained also. I was in such admiration. In the context of the hegemon's escalatory green light, actually in practice for several months now, for Kyiv to attack deeper into the Russian Federation, Putin's offer was extremely generous. That is a direct offer to the hegemon and the collective West. The hegemon, of course, is the United States of America. As the sweaty T-shirt actor in Kyiv, apart from illegitimate, is beyond irrelevant. Here he's referring to Zelensky, who he often refers to as the green sweaty sweatshirt. Predictably, body makes a face when I say that. Predictably, NATO, via that epileptic slab of Norwegian wood, that's a reference to Jens Stoltenberg, until recently the head of NATO, already proclaimed its refusal to negotiate, even as some relatively weak members of the Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament, started discussing the offer, according to Duma chairman Vyacheslav Volodin. Moscow sees the Verkhovna Rada as the only legitimate entity in Ukraine and the only one with which it would be possible to reach an agreement. Russian UN representative of Vasilina Benzia cut to the chase diplomatically. If the generous proposal is refused, next time positions for starting negotiations will be, quote, different, unquote, and, quote, again, far more unfavorable, unquote, according to Duma Defense Committee head Andrei Kartapolov, who obviously was unhappy that the proposal this time was so generous. As the Benzia stressed that in case of a refusal, the collective West will bear full responsibility for further bloodshed. Kartapolov elaborated on the big picture. Russia's real target is to create a whole new security system for the Eurasian space. That, of course, is anathema to the hegemon's elites. Putin's security vision for Eurasia harks back to this legendary speech at the Munich Security Conference in 2007. Now, with the steady advance of an irreversible multinodal, italics mine, says Pepe, and multicentric new system of international relations, the Kremlin is pressing for an urgent solution, considering the extremely dangerous escalation of these past few months. Putin once again had to remind the deaf, dumb, and blind of the obvious, quote, calls to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, which has the largest arsenal of nuclear weapons, demonstrate the extreme adventurism of Western politicians. They either do not understand the scale of the threat they themselves create, or they are simply obsessed with the belief in their own immunity and their own exclusivity. Both can turn into a tragedy, unquote. They remain deaf, dumb, and blind. Is this a proposal that does not solve anything? A fiery debate is raging in informed circles in Russia about Putin's proposals. Critics, by the way, how can there be critics if Russia's a dictatorship? But there are critics. Critics blast it as a capitulation, forced by selected oligarchs and influential business circles adverse to an, quote, almost war, unquote, the preferred motto that keeps postponing the inevitable decapitation strike. Critics argue that the military strategy is totally subordinated to a political strategy. To me, that seems very good. That would explain the serious problems in the Black Sea and in Transnistria. The political center of power refuses to conquer the number one economic/military target, which is Odessa. Furthermore, additionally, Ukraine's weapon supply chains are not being properly interrupted. The key critical point is, quote, this is taking too long, unquote. One just needs to look at the example, okay, of Mariupol. In 2014, the city of Mariupol was left in the control of the Nazi banderistic gangs as part of a financial deal with Renat Akhmetov, the owner of the Azovstal works. The Azovstal works. That's a classic case of oligarchs and financiers prevailing over military objectives. Putin's generosity, visible in this latest peace offer, also elicits a parallel with what happened in Dara in Syria. Russia also negotiated what looked at first like a peace deal, yet Dara remains a mess, extremely violent, with Syrian and Russian soldiers at risk. It gets really tricky when the current proposal only asks NATO not to be encroached in Kyiv, but at the same time, Kyiv will be allowed to have an army based on the aborted April 2022 negotiations in Istanbul. Critics also argue that Putin seems to believe that this proposal will solve the war. Not really, says Pepe. A real denazification campaign is an affair of decades, involving everything from full demilitarization to eradicating focuses of extremist ideology. A real cultural revolution. I couldn't agree more with Pepe here. It's obvious that's what's necessary, especially after the failure to denazify Ukraine after the Second World War. What are Nazis doing in Ukraine nearly 80 years after the Second World War ended? It's just amazing and intolerable. The current escalation already is in tune with the orders given by the rarefied plutocracy who really runs the show to messengers and operatives. Nazi banderista gangs will unleash a war of terror inside Russia for years from Ukraine territory, just like Idlib in Syria remains a terror-friendly environment. I think this observation by Pepe about what's going to happen in Russia for some years is very perspicacious. That is very likely to happen, even bringing peace to Ukraine at this point and ending the major war. It will be hard to track down all the Nazi banderistic gangs and disarm them and put them away, especially in the face of the CIA, which undoubtedly will import terrorists to Ukraine that in turn will seek to bring terror to Russia for years after the war is over. I can practically guarantee that happens, that the CIA is going to do that. The Odessa file. Putin's strategy may be onto something that escapes his critics. His wish for a return of peace and the reestablishment of sound relations with Kyiv and the West has got to be a ruse, as he's the first to know that's not going to happen. It's clear that Kyiv will not willingly cede territory. These will have to be conquered in the battlefield. Moreover, NATO cannot simply sign its cosmic humiliation on the dotted line, accepting that Russia will get what it is demanding since February 2022. Putin's first but diplomatic objective, though, has already been met. He has clearly demonstrated to the global majority he's open to solve the dilemma in a serene atmosphere, while discombobulated NATO keeps shrieking, quote, war, unquote, every other minute. The hegemon wants war, so war it will be to the last Ukrainian. That brings us to the Odessa file. Putin, crucially, did not say anything about Odessa. This is Kiev's last chance saloon to keep Odessa. If the peace proposal is rejected for good, Odessa will feature in the next list of non-negotiables. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov once again nailed it. Quote, Putin is patient. Those with ears will hear. Those with brains will understand, unquote. No one should expect working brains popping up across the West. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has confirmed how NATO is planning massive installations in Poland, Romania, and Slovakia to, quote, coordinate transfer of weapons to Ukraine, unquote. Add to it the epileptic slab of Norwegian wood, that's Jens Stoltenberg. Not very nice to refer to him as an epileptic slab. I guess the Norwegian part of it is okay, stating that NATO is, quote, discussing, unquote, bringing their nuclear weapons to a state of combat readiness, quote, in the face of the growing threat from Russia and China, unquote. Once again, old Stolte, that again is a reference to Stoltenberg, gives away the game. Note, this is all about the hegemon's paranoia with the top two, quote, existential threats, unquote. The Russia-China strategic partnership. That is the leaders of BRICS coordinating the drive towards a multipolar, multinodal, italics mine, quote, harmonic, unquote, Putin's terminology, world. Stealing Russian money is legal. Then there's the blatant theft of Russian financial assets. At their sorry spectacle in Puglia in southern Italy, or maybe it's Puglia in southern Italy, the G7, in the presence of the illegitimate sweaty t-shirt actor, agreed to shove an extra $50 billion in loans to Ukraine, funded by the interest on Russia's frozen and for all practical purposes stolen assets. With impeccably twisted logic, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, whose hairdressing and wardrobe revamp conclusively did not apply to her brains, said that the G7, quote, will not confiscate frozen assets of the Russian Federation, unquote. Quote, we are talking about the interest that they accumulate over time, unquote. As financial scams go, says Pepe, this one is a thing of beauty. Essentially, the main customer, the hegemon, and its instrument, the EU, are trying to mask the actual theft of those frozen, quote unquote, Russian sovereign assets as if this was a legal transaction. The EU will transfer the, quote, frozen, unquote, assets, something around $260 billion, to the status of collateral for the American loan. That's the whole thing, because only the income deriving from the assets would not be enough as collateral to secure the loan. It gets even dicier. These funds will not leave Washington for Kiev. They will remain in town to the benefit of the industrial military complex churning out more weapons. So the EU steals the assets under a flimsy legalese pretext. Janet Yellen already said it's okay, and transfers them to the US. Washington is immune if everything goes wrong, as it will. Only a fool would believe that the Americans would give a sizable loan to a de facto country 404. That's the error message and on the web, error message 404, to a de facto country 404 with a sovereign debt rating in the abyss. The dirty job is assigned to the Europeans. It's up to the EU to change the status of Russia's stolen, quote, frozen, unquote, assets to collateral and wait for the ultimate dicey gambit. The whole scheme concerns Euroclear in Belgium, where the largest amount of Russian funds is parked. Yet the decision on this money laundering scam was not taken by Belgium and not even by the Eurocrats. This was a hegemon imposed G7 decision. Belgium is not even part of the G7. Yet in the end, it will be the EU's credibility, quote unquote, as a whole that will go down the drain across the whole global majority, and the deaf, dumb, and blind predictably are not even aware of it. That was a masterful piece of work by Pepe Escobar. Just fantastic. So colorful with his writing. He is just amazing. And so insightful in the analysis also. Pepe is just so wonderfully free-ranging and encyclopedic. He's just fantastic. And I love to read his stuff. And now I'm going to take your comments on that. And April said, I quit Danny's show because Garland started the neoliberal ideology that government operates, on revenue. I meant Rania, typo. Oh, because Garland, you mean because Danny had Garland Nixon, on his show. Is that right? Kay says, nice hanging out with you guys. Well, thank you, Kay, for coming. It's always nice to hang out with you. Okay, I have one more piece to do. Since there are no more comments, I'm going to get to it right away. That's another one from Pepe. And the title of that one is, this is a fantastic piece too, just a fantastic piece. It says, quote, we need icebreakers, unquote, and more strategic partnerships. And he did this one on June 20th, 2024, Pepe Escobar did. It's 1,200 words. Doesn't even have 2 comments so far, and it's from the UN's review again. And there's a picture of what look like container ships. No caption again. The St. Petersburg Forum offered a wealth of crucial sessions discussing connectivity corridors. One of the key ones was on the Northern Sea Route, the NSR, or in Chinese terminology, the Arctic Silk Road, the number one future alternative to the Suez Canal, with an array of main corporate actors in the room, for instance, from Rosneft, Novatek, Norilsk, Norilsk Nickel, as well as governors and ministers. The stage was set for a comprehensive debate. Top Putin advisor Igor Levitin set the tone. To facilitate seamless container transport, the federal government, that is the federal government of Russia, the Russian Federation, needs to invest in seaports and icebreakers. A comparison was made in terms of technical challenge to the building of the Trans-Siberian Railway, and Igor Levitin also stressed the endless expansion possibilities for city hubs such as Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, and Vladivostok, the northern cities of Russia. Add to it that the NSR will connect with another fast-growing trans-Eurasia connectivity corridor, the INSTC, International North-South Transportation Corridor, which we've covered in earlier streams, recall. Okay, in the Colonel McGregor stream, he was particularly taken with the International North-South Transportation Corridor, whose main actors are BRICS members, Russia, Iran, and India. Also, Alexei Chekunkov, Minister for Development of the Far East and the Arctic, plunged the trial run of the NSR, which cost the same as railway shipping without the bottlenecks. He praised the NSR as a service, quote unquote, and coined the ultimate motto, quote, "We need icebreakers," unquote. Russia, of course, will be the leading player in the whole project, benefiting 2.5 million people who live in the north. Sultan Sulayem, CEO of Dubai-based cargo logistics and maritime services powerhouse DP World, confirmed that, quote, "the current supply chains are not reliable anymore," unquote. As well as being inefficient, the NSR is, quote, "faster, more reliable, and cheaper." From Tokyo to London, the route runs for 24K kilometers via the NSR. It's only 13K kilometers. Boy, that cuts it almost in half. Sulayem, okay, is adamant the NSR is a game changer and, quote, "needs to be implemented now." Vladimir Panov, the special representative for the Arctic from Rosatom, confirmed that the Arctic is, quote, "a treasure chest," unquote, and the NSR, quote, "will unlock it," unquote. But by Rosatom will have all the necessary infrastructure in place, quote, "in 5 years or so," unquote. He credited the fast pace of developments to the high-level Putin-Xi strategic dialogue, complete with the creation of a Russia-China working group. Andre Chibes, I guess it's Chibes, the governor of Murmansk, noted that this deep key port for the NSR, the main container hub in the Arctic, quote, "does not freeze," unquote. He acknowledged the enormity of the logistical challenges, but at the same time, that will attract a lot of skilled workers, considering the high quality of life in the Murmansk area. A maze of interconnected corridors. The building of the NSR indeed can be interpreted as a 21st century accelerated version of the building of the Trans-Siberian Railway in the late 19th, early 20th century. Under the overarching framework of Eurasia integration, the interconnections with other corridors will be endless, from the INSTC to the Belt and Road Initiative projects, part of the Chinese New Silk Roads, the Eurasia Economic Union, the EAU, okay, and ASEAN. In a session focused on the Greater Eurasia Partnership, the GEP, Russian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Alexander Pankin praised this concept of Eurasia, quote, "without dividing lines, uniting ancient civilizations, transportation corridors, and a unified common space of 5 billion people," unquote. Inevitable connections were drawn from GEP to the EAEU and the SCO, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of course, with the proliferation of multimodal transport and alternative payment systems. Khan Sohail, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, the Deputy Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, remarked how virtually, quote, "every day there are new announcements by China," unquote. A long way, quote, since the SCO was established 21 years ago, unquote. then based exclusively on security. Big developments are expected at the SCO summit next month in Astana. Sergei Glatzyov, the Minister of Macroeconomics at the Eurasia Economic Commission, part of the EAEU, praised the EAEU SCO progressive integration and fast developing transactions in baskets of national currencies, something that, quote, that was unchallengeable 10 years ago, unquote. He admitted that even if GEP has not been formalized yet, facts on the ground are proving that Eurasia can be self-sufficient. GEP may be on the initial stage, but it's fast advancing the process to, quote, harmonize free trade, unquote. One other key session in St. Petersburg was exactly on the EAEU ASEAN connection. The ASEAN 10 nations already configured the fourth largest trading bloc in the world, moving $3.8 trillion and 7.8% of global trade annually. The EAEU already has a free trade agreement with Vietnam and is clinching another, with Indonesia. And then there's Northeast Asia, which brings us to the groundbreaking visit by President Putin to the DPRK. That is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, otherwise known as North Korea, of course. A new concept of Eurasia security. This was quite the epic business trip. Russia and the DPRK signed no less than a new comprehensive strategic partnership agreement. On trade, that will allow a renewed flux to Russia of DPRK weapons, artillery shells to ballistics, also magnetic ore, heavy industry and machine tool industry, as well as the back and forth of an army of mega-skilled IT specialists. Kim Jong-un described the agreement as, quote, peaceful, unquote, and, quote, defensive, unquote. And much more, it will become, quote, the driving force accelerating the creation of a new multipolar world, unquote. When it comes to Northeast Asia, the agreement is nothing less than a total paradigm shift to start with these two independent sovereign foreign policy actors. They will not be blackmailed. They totally oppose sanctions as a hegemonic tool. In consequence, they have just determined there will be no more UN Security Council sanctions on the DPRK that are enacted by the United States. So that's at an end now, because, of course, in the Security Council, Russia will veto any further sanctions. And, of course, will not support any current sanctions. And neither will China. The key clause establishing mutual assistance in case of foreign aggression against either Russia or the DPRK means in practice the establishment of a military political alliance, even as Moscow cautiously prefers to phrase that it, quote, does not exclude the possibility of military technical cooperation, unquote. Very diplomatic of Putin, right? The agreement completely shocked exceptionalism because it is a swift counterpunch, not only against NATO's global designs, but against the hegemon itself, which for decades has enforced a comprehensive military political alliance with both Japan and South Korea. Translation: from now on, there is no more military political hegemony in Northeast Asia and in Asia Pacific as a whole. Beijing will be delighted. Talk about a strategic game changer accomplished without a single bullet being fired. The repercussions will be immense because a broader concept of, quote, security, unquote, will now apply equally to Europe and Asia. So welcome in practice to Putin, the statesman advancing a new integrated, comprehensive concept of Eurasian security, italics mine, No wonder the mentally impaired collective West is stunned. I have to say, the collective West seems terribly mentally impaired when it comes to comparison with Putin. I mean, the guy's, he's a diplomatic genius. He's a strategic genius. He's an economic genius. And he's a genius of collaboration. Gilbert Doctorow, Professor Gilbert Doctorow, correctly observed, and we quoted him, if you recall, in the last stream on Friday, how, quote, Putin considers what NATO is about to do as at its western borders as the very act of aggression that will trigger Russia's strategic partnership with North Korea and present the United States with a live threat to its military bases in Korea, in Japan, and in the wider Asia Pacific. And it doesn't matter at all if the Russian response will be symmetric or asymmetric. The crucial fact is that the U.S., quote, containment, unquote, of the Russia-China strategic partnership is already unraveling in real time. In auspicious terms, Eurasia style, what matters now is to focus on connectivity corridors. This is a story that started in the previous editions of the St. Petersburg Forum, how to connect the DPRK to the Russian Far East and beyond to Siberia and wider Eurasia. The DPRK's founding concept of zhush, quote, self-reliance, unquote, quote, autonomy, unquote, is about to enter a new era in parallel to the NSR consolidation in the Arctic. Everyone needs icebreakers in more ways than one, but finishes Pepe.
Can I use the dishwasher? Microwave.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so that's really a magnificent article, so wide-ranging. Okay, I don't know where else you can get this kind of information except, okay, from Pepe. You yourself, to get it, would have to go through a lot of other sources and summarize a lot of other sources as to what is happening. But then the masterful connection that he made, okay, to Russia signing this very comprehensive agreement with the DPRK, and not only focusing on the military aspects of it, but on the economic aspects of it too. Okay, there was a stream today. It was actually Sabby Sab's streams. She had Scott Ritter on. Okay, and Scott was talking about how important, okay, disagreements are, and he pointed to it in terms of the old story that when you fly over South Korea, you see all kinds of lights on. It's all lit up, and when you fly over North Korea, outside of a little bit of lighting, okay, in the Pyongyang area, it's mostly dark. Scott was saying, well, over the next 5 years, that's going to totally change. And North Korea is going to be all lit up. And that's the way he described how important the economic aspect of this is, okay, of this agreement is. And of course, from the military standpoint, the significance is, as Pepe pointed it out here, it's a counter to the long-standing alliance of South Korea, Japan, and the United States. It's a counter to all that. And that is very, very important. So, I'm going to go back and check your other comments. I'm just about all done for tonight, except for further comments from you. Kay says, nice hanging out with you guys. And Greg Mallard said, hi, all. Hi, Greg. Steve Wolfbrand said, hi, Gregory. Kay said, hi, Greg. April says, yeah, Danny had Garland and Scott on, but Garland spoiled it. Okay, I have to check that out. I haven't seen that one yet, but of course I watch Danny a lot, so I'm going to take that in. April said, Joe, won't the climate emergency make the Arctic more paradisical? Meaning growing food and clean air, untapped resources under all that ice, and maybe new beaches? Well, I think even though the Arctic is unfreezing, I think the ocean water up there is still probably going to be awfully cold. And she says, I probably made up a word, uh, paradisical. I don't know if that's a word. It might be. And Kay says, I heard we might get an October surprise from Korea, North Korea. I don't know. I don't think that North Korea is going to directly attack the United States anytime soon. And I think that's also a judgment of Colonel McGregor, okay, and Scott Ritter, as well. They know that if they attack the United States, they will be totally annihilated. Yes, they'll do a lot of damage to the Pacific coast and maybe to other areas as well. And in the future, they'll be much more capable of, doing damage all over. But they cannot prevent retaliation by the submarine fleet, which is still, okay, our ace in the hole, which was totally destroy North Korea. So I think there's a balance of terror there. I don't think North Korea is going to attack the United States. April says, listening to Pepe is like watching peacocks unfurling their magnificent plumage in synchrony over and over, like a good LSD trip opening portals of higher consciousness. You are so lyrical, April. I mean, that was beautiful. But I think it's right on target. That's what reading Pepe is like, or listening to Pepe is like. He's so outstanding. And one of the reasons why he's so outstanding is because he's so cross-cultural. Like, he uses metaphors continuously from different cultures, from Russia, from China, from Central Asia, from Europe, from South America, and of course from America, from the United States. He's using popular culture metaphors from all over the world. And it's amazing to see the facility with which he uses these metaphors. It's wonderful. It's so interesting. And when he starts referring to, Norwegian wood and sweaty sweatshirts and the nicknames he has, for Macron, it's just hilarious. John B. says, Will Fisher gave a good account of MMT on the Jimmy Dore show. I haven't seen that yet. Dore's trying to mend his bridges with Kelton. Okay. I'm privy to some conversations, okay, among a group. One of the things I do is I'm the co-host with Warren Mosler on the Understanding MMT flagship series. Okay. Anyway, Understanding MMT is a new organization that is trying to educate the public, okay, about MMT in simple terms. And the commentary on that show that I've seen so far, but I haven't taken, in the show myself, is that Will Fisher, got absolutely annihilated by the Goldie. I think there was a Goldie. It was probably Peter Schiff that Jimmy Dore had on to argue with him. Now I haven't seen that yet, but okay, the MMTers that are understanding MMT thought that Will Fisher's presentation was far too academic and far away from common sense, and that he clearly lost the debate, okay, to Peter Schiff. So I don't know. I have to check that out for myself. I haven't had a chance to check it out. Probably tomorrow I'll get a chance to check it out. I'm certainly going to look for it. But so his interpretation was not that Jimmy was trying to get back, in the good graces of Stephanie Kelton. Okay, but his interpretation was that what happened there was another attack by Jimmy Dore, okay, on MMT. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to take it in, okay, and I'll see. Now, I don't know who Will Fisher is. I understand he's from UMKC, but since I've never heard of him, okay, I suspect that he's a graduate student there. So Jimmy Dore picked up a graduate student, okay, from UMKC, okay, to contend with someone else who's, it sounded like, it was Peter Schiff that he was arguing with. Peter Schiff is a gold standard guy who invests in gold himself and is always trying to sell the gold standard so he can increase the value of the gold that he holds. He's really an annoying guy, and he's really dumb when it comes to fiat currency. And I don't know if he was there, but if Will Fisher failed to defeat him, if it was him, then that was really a pretty poor job, because it's pretty easy to make Peter Schiff look stupid. I've seen all kinds of guys doing that, going back to Mike Norman 10 years ago. I mean, Mike Norman made Peter Schiff look stupid. Didn't even have to be Stephanie Kelton. So, April says, "Oh, thanks, Joe." Kay says, "See you all later. Love you all." We love you, Kay, as always. Steve Wolfman says, "Good night, Kay." Robert Copeland says, "Most people never heard." Oh, okay. Most people never heard of MMT or Dump the Corruption. I know. John B. says, "Not so, Joe. Fisher baffled them with irrefutable facts." Well, I'm going to love to see it then. I haven't seen it, and I will convey that opinion to the people of understanding MMT once I've seen it, if I agree with your construal, John B. And April says, "Great Saturday night disco dancing with you tonight." Okay, I love the music, says April. Well, thank you again, April. Steve Wolfbrand said, "I thought it was confusing." John B. says it was Paul Stone on Dore's show, not Schiff. Well, I haven't run across Paul Stone before, so that'll be interesting for me. April says, "I can't get into Dore. He's irritating, like an ankle biter." Steve Wolfbrand says, "Jimmy said Kelton won't return his emails." Yeah, probably because Kelton has gotten angry at him because he's been attacking MMT lately after she worked so hard to teach him some MMT. I know she worked hard to teach him MMT. She knows Jimmy for years now. He was one of the early people from the mainstream that she was talking to. Anyway, so she probably gave it up as a bad job, and that's why she won't return his emails, because she thinks he's trying to set her up. That's probably what happened there. Anyway, As far as I'm concerned, maybe I'll try to get into the middle of this.
Maybe you could take.
But anyway, thank you, John B., for your views on it. I will certainly take them into account when I watch the show, which I will probably do tomorrow. Also, thank you all for coming. This has really been a fun stream. You've made it a fun stream with all your comments. And I hope I made it a fun stream with my reading, commentary, and analysis, and also with the videos I showed. So good night to everybody. Bye all. I will be back on Tuesday night. I already have some things planned. Okay. For Tuesday night, there'll be more treatment of Scott Ritter's views on the show. He has a new piece out, and it's a very, very interesting piece. And I've run across already some other things that I'm probably going to be putting on, I'll be putting on the show. I may well be putting on some of the Rania Kalik video, with Elijah Magnier, because it's so good on Hezbollah and the capabilities, of Hezbollah. So I may be doing that also, and I'll certainly be looking at Scott Ritter's Substack, and also at a video from Colonel McGregor, which is very, very good. Okay, I like what Doug does. This video was actually Doug was being interviewed on Colonel Daniel B. Davis's show. Okay, Daniel Davis is a friend of Colonel McGregor. He's also very perspicacious himself, and the interview was a very good one. I'll be playing part of that. I'll be going into Scott Ritter's Substack, which was a very good one. And I'll probably go into Elijah Magnier's thing too. In fact, those may constitute the three things I'll do on Tuesday. So that should be a very, very interesting show too. I hope you'll all be with me then, and I hope you will all like, share, and subscribe to this video. For God's sake, folks, I only got one like. Can it possibly be that I got only one like? Maybe the interface is not showing, the number of likes I have. But anyway. So thank you all tonight. And Steve says good night and says good crowd tonight, Joe. Yeah, pretty good crowd tonight. I do think the stream has been growing. It's been slow, like pulling teeth, but it does seem to be growing again. And I'm very grateful for that. If it grows by twice, if it gets to 50 regulars, let's say. Steve says there are 7 likes. Well, thank you, Steve. That's great. So, if I can get it up to 50, I'll feel confident to start bringing on some heavy guests. You might wonder why I don't do too many interviews. I used to do a lot more interviews, because my attendance, was far better. But I don't like to, I feel like I'm wasting the time of, some of the heavy guests I would like to ask to come on the show if I don't have at least a moderately sizable audience. Because a lot of them are guests on shows that have thousands of views. So before I invite people, I really want to be able to say at least I've got, generally speaking, 50 views on the show, that it's growing fast. Then I will start to interview some more people. But I'll never be just an interview show because, frankly, I like my own commentary too much. So that's the story. Okay, I'll see you all on Tuesday. If Dee has a show on Sunday or Monday, I might join one of those shows. Though usually I like to take Sunday and Monday off. And I have a lot of things to do right now because I'm sitting on top of some URLs that I bought a long time ago and have been holding for 14 years. And I want to begin to market those, and that's going to take some time. So April says, sleep well, and thanks so much. Thank you, April, for all your enthusiasm. It's always great stuff. On that note, I'm going to end the stream. See you soon.